Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, Eureka City Councilwoman Natalie Arroyo has declared her candidacy for 4th District Supervisor. We'll talk about her ambitions for the district and her vision for the region. Also, remember that day a year ago when thousands of Trump supporters, militia members, and white supremacists stormed the Capitol and wiped their disdain all along its hallowed halls? Congressman Huffman and Jamie Raskin are making sure no one forgets. Coming up next. Live from the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Our guest tonight, in the broadest sense, is democracy. We're delighted to have Eureka City Councilwoman Natalie Arroyo on the show tonight to talk about the upcoming race for the 4th District seat on the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. It's often seen as the most powerful political position in Eureka, and it's naturally sought time and again by members of the City Council. But this time, 2 sitting council members will vie for the same seat at the same time, and they'll face off against a current county planning commissioner who was on the council a decade ago. We'll talk to all the candidates over the next few weeks. What is their vision for the 4th District? How will their experiences in private and public life help to guide and inform their term if they win? And where do they stand on the issues that matter to you? Now, all that could be considered part 1 of tonight's show. Also coming up tonight is a passionate defense of our democratic political system overall by Congressman Huffman and Representative Jamie Raskin from Maryland. The 2 men held a town hall this week to talk about the state of our American democratic system and how it's doing in the wake of last year's riot at the Capitol building and the broader coup attempt that made it possible. It's an articulate and passionate dissection, as you'll see, and it's important, I think, to see 2 current representatives participating in the kind of conversation that many Americans have long thought extinct. The news they share is alarming, but something we all need to keep in mind as we edge closer to the coming midterm elections. Who can be trusted with power? As Raskin points out, we all need to find ways large and small to backstop democracy and help defend it from the threats encroaching at virtually every angle. It's a fascinating yet sobering conversation and one long overdue. But first, we got to lead with the local. And there's no bigger local race than the sprint for the 4th District seat on the Board of Supervisors. Joining us now is Councilwoman Natalie Arroyo. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So, you've hit the big time. You're running for the Board of Supervisors. Let's start, with the basic question. Why do you want the seat? Why do you want to move up from the City Council to the board?
Great. Well, I'm running for 4th District Supervisor because I believe I'm the candidate with the ideal skill set, experience, and relationships to really take our county forward. And I plan to focus on advancing our region's economic development opportunities, housing options for all income levels in our community, really focusing on transportation safety. In particular in Eureka, we've had a lot of issues with the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists and motorists in our community. And then lastly, to really focus on increasing the satisfaction that both residents and employees of the county have with their county government.
Now, when you mentioned a skill set, what do you think that, what are the particular skills that you have that you think might be particularly useful at this moment?
Sure. Well, I have a heck of a lot of work experience already in local government, so both local and federal government. So I've served on the City Council for a little over 7 years now. So I will be wrapping up my second term on the City Council, and I'll be termed out at the end of 2022. And through that role, I've worked with so many local government agencies and really gotten to see, how the sausage is made in local government. As well as working closely with the county supervisors themselves. So I certainly bring that experience with me. And I would say, a lot of times folks want to see people who are fresh and new to politics, but there is something to be said for having that experience and understanding what it takes to make decisions, not in a vacuum, but with a group of people that work for the government and for the residents. I also bring experience in the Coast Guard, so a lot of maritime knowledge there. A lot of disaster response knowledge. I teach at Humboldt State University, so I have, Cal Poly Humboldt.
That's right.
The first time I've actually said the new name. So I have connections there too. So I could talk a little bit more about my experience if you'd like, but definitely a broad range of experiences that I bring to the table. Yeah,
so you mentioned, what subject did you teach at HSU or Cal Poly Humboldt? There's got to be a shorter way.
I know, it's hard to get used to. I teach in the Environmental Science and Management Department. So teaching students who are studying environmental restoration and forestry, fire management. Right now I'm teaching an environmental conflict resolution class.
Ah.
So really folks who are in those fields of science need to take this class to graduate. And I use a lot of experiences from the local community to really illustrate the points on how to effectively resolve conflict.
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of known for two particular efforts in that direction. I mean, you were instrumental, along with Kim Burgell, who's also running for the 4th District seat, in helping return some land to the Wiyot tribe, which got national attention. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that, sort of demonstrates your ability to lead.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I think was really important about that experience for me was how impactful it was to go to the Wiyot Tribal Council and ask them what they wanted from the city of Eureka.
Yeah.
A lot of times I think people make plans and invite tribes to the table and say, hey, we saved a seat at the table for you, but you have to come to us to sit in that seat. So I went to the tribal council meeting and asked, what I could do to improve the relationship between the city of Eureka and the Wiyot tribe. And the first thing they said was that the return of Tuluwat was first and foremost on their minds. And so I committed at that time to do everything I could to make that happen. And at the same time, I know that Kim Burgell was also talking with her people she knew within the tribe. So we had two different approaches to a similar issue, and then we continued to work together on it for years to make it happen. Yeah. And even though there was a lot of commitment from the city, it still took nearly 4 years for it to go from idea to actually transferring the deed.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of things written about it. We have the FNX channel here at KEET as part of our package of channels, and it was featured on that lineup, talking about how there are a lot of communities and a lot of jurisdictions that have these relationships with tribes where they've kind of come to a standstill on these long-standing issues. And I think for a lot of folks that pointed to perhaps a different direction that could be taken. You mentioned the relationship between the city and the county. What is the state of that relationship now, do you think? And how would your election, how would you work to improve that relationship, or where do you see it needs improvement?
Sure. Well, we currently meet pretty frequently. There are 2 city council members and 2 county supervisors who meet regularly to talk about issues that we both face and that we need to work on together. And so I see those conversations continuing to move forward. It's just a space to really vet concerns and hear about upcoming projects that's really valuable. So continuing to hold those meetings is important. I certainly have seen things from the city's perspective, and often wished for more resources for the county to bring to bear. But I also know that the county has limited resources too. So it'll be interesting to, bring my knowledge of the city and what our qualms are and challenges are to the county, and see how we could approach things differently on kind of a bigger level, and how we could advocate for our region on the state level and federal level. So I'm really looking forward to being able to do that. And I know you mentioned Eureka, but I also don't want to forget that the district also includes, portions of Myrtletown and the Samoa Peninsula.
Sure.
And I've worked really closely with folks on the Samoa Peninsula for the past 6+ years on a community organizing effort and environmental and public health effort. So being able to see some of those things come to fruition, reducing dumping, addressing some of the development concerns that are going on out there, I think is a really exciting opportunity too.
Talking about a little bit about the Samoa Peninsula, brings about the subject of economic development. There's been a lot of talk over the years of doing something out there to increase industry. Where do you find the balance between, environmental restoration and, basically, I guess, lifestyle protection versus economic development and bringing in businesses that could bring jobs? How do you see the balance there?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. My background is as an environmental planner. So in addition to the other things I mentioned, I work for a local nonprofit in that community for 15 years doing fisheries restoration and trails planning and all kinds of environmental projects that have a nexus between people and their environment. Mm-hmm. And so I bring that kind of thinking to things. And I am impressed, frankly. I have to hand it to the Harbor District for the innovation they've shown out on the Samoa Peninsula with some of the new projects they're bringing forward and collaborating with the county on. So, I hope to see the wind energy development move forward. I hope to see solutions to the remaining challenges with the fish farm, but I think that we're seeing a great direction there. And I know that from talking to people on the Samoa Peninsula, many people want to see economic development out there and a little bit more housing, not a lot, but a little bit. And folks think it's worth it to see that kind of development in their communities so they can have things again like a community grocery store or, more community spaces that are there. So it's not so much of just a bedroom community. So I think seeing that industrial development and economic development is going to be huge for the peninsula. And I think by and large, people really want it.
You mentioned working with area nonprofits. We have a lot of nonprofits. This just in, right? I mean, but what is it about Humboldt County, do you think, that fosters that sort of nonprofit spirit? And do you think that it could be used by the county in a more productive way, or is that relationship maximized right now?
That's a great question. I mean, so our community is rich with nonprofits, and it's pretty incredible. And as to why that is, I think we're a lot of people move here with a lot of passion for the environment and passion for the community. They want to live closer to nature and closer to one another, but in some ways they also want to live kind of more independently. So there's that spirit of kind of self-reliance that I think brings people to really want to create new organizations that help serve the community in the ways that they think are best. So there's all these nonprofits in this community, more than any place I've ever lived. And one of the things that nonprofits can do well is work collaboratively with local government to provide services that are really critical to the community. So I know in the nonprofit world, have worked with county government and with local jurisdictions for many years to get things done that they just don't have the bandwidth for, but they're able to collaboratively apply for grants to enact. And so there's a lot of, we really shouldn't appreciate the role of the nonprofit community in Humboldt. Absolutely. Because that's where so many of the resources and services that we all value really come from. And so, I think there's plenty of opportunity there. We can leverage that now and continue to leverage it in the future.
Excellent. You serve on the board of the Klamath River Renewal Corporation. Is that the right title?
It is, yeah.
Which advocates for dam removal on the Klamath River, and obviously that's been a long time coming, and there's been some significant progress and then a hiccup here and there, but it seems like that may actually come to pass. What do you think the county should learn about that resolution, and where could that kind of work point us in the future in terms of undamming rivers or just trying to repair watersheds?
Absolutely. So there's so much work to do with watershed restoration and particularly dam removal and coming up with approaches to addressing failing dams. On the Klamath, it's a little more cut and dry at this point. I think it's very clear. The evidence is very clear that those dams need to come out, that they're not serving the function that they should be serving. And that there's, it's so important to tribes that those dams be removed. And so I see my role on the KRRC board, which I was appointed to by the governor, but it is a nonprofit organization tasked with removing 4 dams on the Klamath River. I see my role in that as an extension of, what started with the Wiyot tribe and, a passion for environmental justice and making sure that we see projects like that through. So this is huge. The scale of it is, it'll be the largest dam removal in the world when it's completed. And right now we're doing all the boring but important stuff to make sure that we can actually go through the drawdown process and construction, removal of the dams in the next couple of years. So really looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. And I think we'll be looking at, what the dams on the Eel are doing for our communities and weighing those same needs and benefits of potential dam removal there as well. So I hope to see more projects like this come forward, but it's certainly one of a kind right now.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Two more questions. I got 2 minutes, so we'll try to get both of these in. As a county supervisor, you'll be in charge of the public health response. And obviously you'll delegate to your public health officer, but what do you think of the county's response thus far to COVID-19? Are you happy that they've taken things the way they have, or should they have been more stringent, say, with the employee vaccine requirement, or where do you fall on that?
We required vaccines for employees in the city of Eureka. I can tell you that. We're the only local government to have done so. And I think that was the right thing to do. So, of course, I realize that the county government is much larger. There are a lot more employees and, they had a different approach. So I would like to see a more aggressive response to dealing with public health issues like this in the future. Mm-hmm. I certainly think that I'm proud of what the city has done. It's been controversial, but to me, it was absolutely the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Finally, if you're elected, you would be the only woman of color on the board. How important do you think that perspective would be?
That's really important to me, honestly. I have so many students and young people in the community in particular who will come up to me and say that it really means a lot to them to see me in a position of leadership, and that, they hope to emulate me. And it brings a little tear to my eye every time, but it really means a lot to me to show that that's possible. And I see it as my role to open the door to other people who would like to have more of a voice in their community's decision making. So I think it means a lot to people, and I'll continue to advocate for folks whose voices haven't been heard as much to be included.
Excellent. That's pretty much all I have for you. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and I'm sure that we'll talk again because it's a long race, and then there's the runoff, and who knows where it's all going. So we'll be happy to have you back.
I'm looking forward. Can I give my website real quick?
Absolutely. Please do.
Sure. It's arroyoforsupervisor.com. So ARROYO for supervisor.com.
Excellent. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Have a good night. And we'll be right back after this short break.
We realized there was a big problem along the border, and I don't think anybody realized just how big it was.
When people cross, they have to walk around the checkpoint, and this is where people die.
An illegal alien crosser is an illegal alien crosser.
I'm very worried because my cousin Juan has been missing for 3 days.
This is Eddie Canales of the South Texas Human Rights Center. I located a body.
In a virtual town hall held this week, Congressman Jared Huffman hosted Trump impeachment manager and Maryland Representative Jamie Raskin to talk about the threats that currently face our democracy.
Yeah, we have held so many town halls and forums on different subjects over the years, but I have rarely seen more interest in a subject than the one we're going to address tonight, safeguarding our democracy. Whether you are concerned about voting rights or election integrity or the ongoing threats that we face relating to the January 6th insurrection, almost everyone I talk to these days in every part of my district shares with me their concerns about whether we're at risk of potentially losing American democracy as we know it. I share that concern. It's a big part of what Representative Jamie Raskin, my guest tonight, and I have been working on for the past year and beyond. And it's why I wanted to dedicate a town hall to this subject. So we are fortunate in this conversation to have a bit of a ringer with us to discuss this issue. I have so many talented and knowledgeable colleagues in Congress, but if I had to pick just one to consult with regarding the Constitution and the legal and historical underpinnings of our democracy, if I only had one friend I could phone to talk about the state of American democracy, it would be the incomparable Jamie Raskin.
Raskin laid out a breathtaking and somewhat surreal summary of what happened on January 6th, describing the separate layers that all took part in the attack.
I saw essentially 3 rings of sedition taking place on that day, and there was an outer ring that was a mass demonstration called by the president, you'll recall, for a wild protest. And that ring of protest became a mob riot, which isn't to say that everybody there participated, but lots of people did. And of course, 150 of our police officers were wounded or injured with broken necks, jaws, noses, vertebrae, arms, legs, People lost fingers, eyes gouged, traumatic brain injury in a number of cases, post-traumatic syndrome for dozens and dozens of officers. Okay, the middle ring was the ring of the insurrection, and here you found a couple of thousand people who were part of the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Aryan Nations, the militia groups, the First Amendment Praetorian, some religious cults, the Unification Church was there. There were Christian white nationalists. These groups had been preparing for a paramilitary assault on the Capitol. They were the first ones to smash our windows and to begin the violent assault against our officers on that day. Believe it or not, that was not even the scariest ring. The scariest ring was the very inside ring of the coup. And it's an odd word, I know, in American political parlance, because we don't have any real experience with coups in American history. And we think of a coup as something taking place against a president, but this was a coup orchestrated by the president against the vice president and against the Congress. And the whole purpose, of course, was to overthrow the result of the 2020 presidential election, which Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes, in which he clinched in the Electoral College 306 to 232. Trump had gone to Republican-controlled state legislatures to urge them to void out the popular election and to substitute in pro-Trump Electoral College slates. And to their credit, the legislative leaders in several states, including Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, said no, they would not do that. At that point, Trump decided that they would go directly to election officials, and they approached around 30 of them, including most prominently Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, simply to urge them to find more votes. And Trump, of course, was caught on tape telling Raffensperger in Georgia, all I'm looking for is 11,780 votes. That's all I want. That was not Donald Trump trying to stop the steal. That was Donald Trump trying to steal the election and commit voter fraud with Secretary of State Raffensperger. So the whole thing came down to whether they could get Vice President Mike Pence to declare lawless, unconstitutional powers on that day to reject and repudiate and return electoral college votes to Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, at least those three states, perhaps Wisconsin and Michigan as well. But the idea was to get that 306 number in Biden's column down to below 270. At that point, under the 12th Amendment, if no one had captured a majority in the Electoral College, the contest would have been kicked over immediately into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election. If nobody's got a majority in the Electoral College, it goes immediately to a contingent election where we will vote not according to one member, one vote, but one state, one vote. And so after the 2020 elections, they had 27 states in the GOP column. We have 22 states. One state, Pennsylvania, was split down the middle. So even if they lost the at-large representative from Wyoming, they still would have had 26 states, and they would have declared Trump the president. He would have seized the presidency for 4 years. He likely would have come over and invoked the Insurrection Act and declared something like martial law in order to put down the insurrectionary chaos that he had unleashed against us. And that was basically the plan.
Huffman, toward the end, asked Raskins to talk about how partisanship has become so poisonous, and how we as a society might move past the vitriol.
Obviously, I'm a partisan. You're a partisan. We are passionate Democrats. We're progressives. But when the system is working, there's a constructive friction between the two parties. We have vigorous debates. This has been going on since the beginning of our country with the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, but we were all on Team America. Something has changed recently with the way the Republican Party, most of them, not the Liz Cheneys and Adam Kinzingers, but the Donald Trump Republican Party, how they approach that most basic aspect of our two-party system. They're unwilling to accept that we even have anything valid to offer, and they're unwilling to accept election results when they lose. So it's not a particularly hopeful time, and we've got this media machine and social media out there where people have figured out how to make huge amounts of money off of the dysfunction and the conflict. I don't have a single solution to how we break through that and end it, but I think all of us have to think about how we make it better. And I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think you captured my thoughts mostly. I mean, I will say that every age almost believes that it's in an age of unprecedented partisan vitriol and bitterness. And you go back and look at even like Jefferson and Adams, who were best friends, but the things that they were saying about each other in that 1800 election, I mean, it was brutal. And so it does go back to the Federalists versus the Democrat Republicans. And I mean, you can find people saying some nasty stuff about George Washington, who got all the Electoral College votes when he ran, But having said that, there are moments when people do seem to step outside of the existing constitutional order. And you can find some of the hallmarks in it in the use and deployment of violence. Yeah. And also trying to question the validity of elections that have been upheld, as in this case, by more than 60 federal and state courts, including 8 judges who were nominated to the bench by Donald Trump himself. They've rejected every claim of electoral fraud or corruption. So, look, we know how to be nonpartisan when we want to. I'm sure if you call Congressman Huffman's office and you ask for help on a Social Security check or VA benefits or PPP loan, whatever it is, he doesn't say, matter. Are you a Democrat, a Republican, a Green, a Libertarian, Independent? Just says, do you live in my district? Because we're bound to just help people in our district. And then he goes to work. We know how to do that. And I think it's fine to fight like cats and dogs in the campaign, but when campaigns are over and we're sworn to uphold the Constitution, we got to remember where the word party comes from. It's from the French word parti, a part. And we got to remember our party is just part of the whole. It might be the part we agree with the most about how to proceed politically, but we represent everybody, and we know how to do that when we want to, and we've got to think like that when it comes to the constitutional structure itself, because all of us are invested in it, and we've got to be nonpartisan and vigorous, zealous in defense of the constitutional system.
To watch the entire conversation, visit Huffman's Facebook page. This week, HSU announced that the California State University Board of Trustees has approved its new designation as California State Polytechnic University Humboldt. That is Cal Poly Humboldt. This caps nearly 2 years of planning for new curricula and facilities, increased hands-on student research opportunities, and expected enrollment growth. The expanded curricula will emphasize STEM infused with humanities, arts, and ethics, and will be grounded in sustainability and social justice. Officials promise that Cal Poly Humboldt will work with local tribes and nations to respect and reflect Indigenous wisdom. Thanks for joining us this evening. You may have noticed these past several weeks, but we've recently taken steps to improve accessibility. Captions for tonight's program were provided by Aberdeen Broadcast Services. Stay tuned, stay informed.